Good afternoon, students. I am sorry I didn't get this done this morning. I had some things come up that I had to take care of. So I'm going to put this one out there and then hopefully get chapter 12 out as well. So this chapter is in regards to bridges and barriers in therapeutic relationships. This is chapter 11 in your book. Please read through it really carefully, especially when you get to the particular barriers. So like barriers such as mistrust and some of the other ones that are listed there. So these are your objectives. You can read through these on your own. Trust, empowerment, empathy, mutuality, and confidentiality are things that we need to promote. And some of the other barriers can be things that are barriers to all of them. Plus, all of number 3 can be considered barriers. Anxiety, stereotyping, and lack of personal space, plus limited time, which we all know about so well. All right, so bridges and barriers. This is a picture from your textbook. It talks about how our relationships bridge between the patient and how the barriers can block that caring, respectful, trusting care. Bridges to the relationship include respect, caring, empowerment, trust, empathy, mutuality, and veracity. Respect for their beliefs, opinions, and feelings. Lack of respect is considered a barrier. Caring, this supports the basic integrity of your patient and of their family. Lack of caring, of course, can be a barrier. Empowerment is the ability to allow the patient to control their own health and own well-being, taking charge of their health and their life. Lack of empowerment is also a barrier. So this, an example of this would be when we tell the patient what we think is best for them and encourage them to do that instead of letting them choose their own path. Trust, of course, is the foundation of all relationships. Our patients need to feel safe. They need to be able to trust us and those that are taking care of them. If you look at page 205 in your book, there is a box there, and it talks about techniques to promote trust. So I'd like you to look through those and understand them and be aware of all of those. Empathy, we've talked about enough. Lack of empathy, of course, can be a barrier. Mutuality means that the nurse and the client agree on the client's health problems and the ways to resolve them. So it's a mutual agreement between the patient and the nurse. We both understand what's going on. We both know the health problem that the patient is experiencing and understand it, and we both agree on the best way for us to treating it. Both patient and the nurse are committed to enhancing the client's well-being. Pardon the noise in the background. Of course, that's my wonderful dog, Chip. And actually, I will show you a little picture of Chip because right now he's at my feet thinking he's not getting paid attention to. So that's my little Chip. I've had Chip 1 year today. Today's his 1 year since we got him day, so kind of a little celebration. It's also my husband's birthday. Sorry. Okay. Barriers to relationships include anxiety, stereotyping and bias, over-involvement, violation of personal space, time limitations, cultural barriers, and gender barriers. Anxiety, of course, the one thing that I want you to remember is that people often have this feeling of impending doom when they have anxiety. Page 209 in your book talks about ways of reducing anxiety for your patient. But if they're anxious and they're nervous and they can kind of shut down and not listen to what you're saying, so it can create that barrier. Stereotyping, remember this is where we feel that all people in a particular group have the same characteristics. Bias, of course, is our own personal feelings about particular groups. Over-involvement is where we want to become more involved in our patient's life than what they think is acceptable. So don't try to share too much with your patients. It's hard, hard sometimes because, especially in long-term care facilities, we really get to know the residents that we work with, and it's really hard to keep those relationships kind of to ourselves. The rest of them we've all talked about time and time again. Violation of personal space. Remember, that isn't just about being physically in their space, but in their emotional spaces as well. Time limitations. We're all in a time crunch, so we may feel rushed. We may not feel like we have enough time to spend with the patients. Cultural barriers, of course. Remember, those aren't just related to the race and ethnicity, as we've talked about so often, but also about financial and social and all of those things as well. And then, of course, there are also gender differences when talking about barriers. So please read through all of those chapters and understand them. One of the activity that we're going to do in class Thursday is going to involve all of these barriers. And so going back to the last slide too, looking at all of those different barriers. And you guys are going to do some role playing, and the rest of us are going to try to figure out which barrier it is that you are displaying to us. All right. Steps in the caring process. CARE, C-A-R-E, a good anagram to help you remember. Connect with your client, appreciate your client's situation, respond to their needs, and empower them to partner with you in problem solving. So when you're connecting with your client, be attentive. Give them your full attention. Don't try to multitask. Don't try to do different things. Introduce yourself. Don't just go in and start saying things that are going to be done, but make sure that the patient understands what's going to happen and agrees to it as well. Of course, appreciate their situation. Empathy plays a big part of that. Respond to their needs, and especially establishing what their priorities are. And what their expectations are. That's the most important thing, is what are they trying to get out of the relationship. And then empower them, again, to work with you in figuring out what's going on. Empathy in action. Remember that we need to recognize and classify requests. There are two types of requests, and your book talks about these. There's processing requests, and requests for information and action. And those are the two main types. So look through the book and make sure that you understand that. Processing requests. So in other words, how are we going to do things? How can we get the information to them so that they understand what's going on? And then they may request information and action according to their needs. Another type of action or request that we don't often see listed as one is understanding involvement. The client needs that empathetic understanding. So when you are involved with them, make sure that you are empathetic to them and completely understand what's going on. Attending behaviors. This is facilitating that empathy. Include alternatives. Make sure that you have that open posture, all those nonverbal cues that you might send to your patients and clients, allowing the patient to express themselves, responding to their verbal and nonverbal cues, and of course eye contact. And then always using empathy with your responses. Show your client that you understand how they are feeling, but don't get this mixed up with sympathy. They don't want your sympathy. They want you to understand what's going on. All right, reducing some of these barriers, things that you can do. Establish that trust. Demonstrate that caring and empathy. Just a minute. Jep, stop. He's chewing up a blanket. Demonstrate that caring and empathy that we so often talk about. Jep. No. Everybody can see what's happening here. Yeah. Stop. Empowering your client to take control of their health and well-being, recognizing and reducing their anxiety, again, maintaining that personal distance, making sure that you practice cultural sensitivity. Work to be bilingual, of course, if you can be. That's great, but there are a lot of rules and regulations out there now regarding interpreting. So being bilingual is very helpful. However, that doesn't mean you can always act as that person's specific interpreter. So good to be able to speak different languages, but not always something that you're going to have the ability to do. Using those therapeutic relationship building activities, active listening, we kind of went through that the other day and did that game where you passed around the paper clips and the Reese's peanut butter cups. So remember, active listening. Don't just listen to what you think are the most important things. Listen to the whole story. And of course, avoiding that medical jargon. Keep it at the level of the way the patient will be able to understand it best. So this was a pretty short chapter in PowerPoint. In summary, we need to care, empower the patient, encourage trust with them, empathy, mutuality, and confidentiality are concepts to that therapeutic nurse-client relationship. And be aware of your own personal behaviors and factors that can create barriers as well. All right, so that's chapter 11. Done in 11 minutes. Yay. Sorry Chip was a pest. But whenever I decide to not pay attention to him, he figures out all kinds of naughty things that he can do, so I have to look at him. All right. Have a good rest of your day. Hopefully I'll see you in a little bit for chapter 12.